On. Okay. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes? Okay. Thank you. I'd love to take the time to ask how everybody is, but this is recorded for everyone else too. So, um, I did want to touch on something before I jumped right in. A couple of things. We've we're pretty close to setting next year's complete schedule. There it is. And it's definitely full, but looks like I'll be traveling out of country a couple of times, but planning on doing um, several online courses, actually 6 or 7 new courses, different courses, and those will be available online. Feedback from people all over the world have wanted to have more opportunities to take classes, and so I think some relevant subject matter um, available on classes. First of all, doesn't take as much time sorry about that, to have to travel and stay someplace, all the expense, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and we can get some more detail done through an online course. And some of these will be live, others will be produced, I will say, with graphics and video and things like that to point things out. So these are going to be some of them are going to be more, I will say, professionally produced as far as content goes, video, etc., so that you're not having to stare at my face all the time or listen to me constantly. So we're going to institute that over the next couple of years to develop. Right now, I've got let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 different courses plus a couple more by outside people, minimum at the, and by outside I mean not me, developed. Um, so basically broadening the available offerings for the Institute and becoming what we wished to do in the first place, which was be an educational source. A couple of these new courses are slightly outgrowths from these live talks because an hour and a half on a deep dive wasn't enough, and more context is needed for certain subject matter. Um, Again, helping with graphics and videos and things like that. Um, but some of the ones that we're going to be doing next year, I'm going to be redoing the puppy development course online. Try to streamline it a little better than what it was before, and emphasize certain areas a little more than what was the last time it was online. That was over about a year ago, I believe. I did puppy development. Another one is aggressive dogs, the second uh, sequence in the aggressive dog sequence. We had that one earlier this year, I believe in August. The next one will be in April, early April, that'll be offered online. Um, Another one is polite play. Um, pack dynamics, um, human learning types, and those are available. That one is available to course 2 and up people for understanding human learning types for yourself, how to relate to them, etc., more in detail, so that you can help your clients better, frankly. And then dog personality types in depth a little more. That's the other class that I'm probably going to do next year. That's what I've got lined out for next year anyway. But there's probably another 10 courses that I've got planned out already. So I thought I would let you guys know that in case anybody was interested in any of those and upcoming. I'm not going to get into the other upcoming ones for the following year. So that's going to take a lot of my time. Consequently, I'm not going to be doing uh, as many of the online course ones. There will only be one of them, and there will be 3 in person, one at the center in Blue Ridge. We're working on doing one in the Netherlands this year and then one in Canada. So yeah, we'll see how all that works out. The one in Canada is Western Canada. So sorry about you in the East. So, but planning on trying to do Eastern Canada again, Ontario or Quebec, in 2026. So that's the plan so far. Things seem to have worked out pretty well. But the rest of my time is taken up with the core classes throughout that year, next year. So, okay, so let's jump into this. So I hope all of you guys were either on or had the opportunity to see the last 2 live talks, because we initially talked about human bias and what that means in a number of matters of how we see things, and then dog bias on how they see things and encounter things. And then this is kind of where the gaps are, what gaps that can create um, due to those 2 things. So this particular talk is about the gaps. Next month will be the talk about how do we bridge some of those gaps, and that may go depending on how far we get into that, covering those things, because that seems to be it's not just the why that people want to know, it's the what and the how to. So we talk about the what's, we're going to talk about the how to, or the whys this time, and the what's about it. And then, next month will be kind of the how about it. But it seems people want those answers more than the why. Um, but you have to know the why first for the what and the how to be relevant. Otherwise, you're just kind of shooting in the dark, essentially, or 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 taking advice on the internet. So, um, so I've kind of put off giving topics. Now I pushed the November, December topics off to next year that I originally had, because this series was important, I thought, and gives perspective. So I'm pushing those even off till probably the starting back into February, to give January the chance. So we really haven't published what is next after December's wrap up, because December may go into January, because it's a pretty deep topic area of a how to, frankly. So let's jump in here. So the human dog bias problematics. So that equation between humans and dogs, our morphology, how our brains work, how we encounter things, how we've evolved, all of those things. And so we'll jump into that right now. So with the body, we have, and you can probably follow along on your outlines that you have from dog and human, because what I'm doing is just kind of combining those two. I really haven't changed anything on those. We're just going to talk about them together and what problems are created by that. So morphologically, body, dogs, I'll talk about dogs first generally and humans second. So dogs being quadrupedal and humans being bipedal, first of all, that creates a, an issue with us versus dogs, in in the way that we move and the directionality and how we and how we respond physically to things, frankly. Our movement forward and back, just like dogs move forward and back because the articulation of our joints, our knees, our hips, those sorts, uh, is is identical to theirs, but we don't have the front legs that are on the ground to stabilize ourselves front to back as much as side to side. So when we do run or walk fast, we get narrow in the way we move. And so any sideways movement, we can move a leg out and brace ourselves if we articulate our knees with that simple joint. Whereas dogs, if they're moved to the side, they really don't have that wide brace ability that we do to catch ourselves and keep moving on. They have to kind of slow down. So they have advantages in movement and counter to movement too. In other words, pulling or pulling away from us, uh, forward or back, to a front back, whereas we have advantages side to side and stability if we spread our base out a little bit. And the other part, that front to back length and strength versus side to side balance and strength, is where when you are attached to a dog through a leash, collar, harness situation, they have an advantage as to their lower center of gravity, obviously, um, being close to the ground, and the pulling forward or away from us back behind us that takes us off balance because of our bracing ability side to side, but not so much forward. So if we're moving a foot forward, for instance, we're literally off the ground and off balance. So a dog moving in any direction in about a 45-degree area from zenith in front of us, either way, is going to make us step off balance. We have to catch ourselves. The dog is already in its normal mode. So that creates a problem. And that's what the problems are what I'm pointing out this time in the way that we're attached to each other. It's one of the reasons that heel position is a necessary thing. One of the reasons that heel position is necessary for us, because we're asking the dog to be in a position that it doesn't have the balance front to back advantage. We have the balance side to side. They don't. So that's one of the reasons that heel is an important aspect. But we'll talk about how we solve these things, whether it's good or bad. It's how humans try to solve them. I'll put it that way, and then we'll talk about hopefully, um, you know, what's what's a natural way that dogs can understand and can agree with pretty easily. So, okay. So that front to back strength versus side to side strength and bracing is we're polar opposites in that, in the way we move and how our balance is. So that creates a problem with us being together. Their neck strength and characteristics versus arm strength. And one of the issues that humans use is because we are so hand dominant in all of all of our manipulations, we don't think about our legs. So we use our hands, and that is literally the furthest thing in length away from our center of gravity, which is about 2 inches below your navel. So our center of mass of our body is about 2 inches below your navel on average. Um, and furthest thing away, then your moment arm of taking somebody off balance is easy out here because it's literally the furthest thing away. So it multiplies the force of taking off balance. So we attach things to our hands, which is the furthest point away on our body from our center of gravity. So a dog easily takes us off balance. That's part of our morphology, is we manipulate things with our hands. We use them in numerous ways and to attach ourselves to things. And so understanding that we're actually at a disadvantage when we attach ourselves to an animal with a leash. Um, think of the leash more of, well, I'm already providing a solution, so I'm not going to do that. I'll do that next time. Otherwise, it'll take too much time. Um, but the arm strength then versus their neck and their entire body and force forward depends on, male, female, whether you're 70 pounds soaking wet or 300 pounds, depends on our physical size and physicality, whether or not we have any ability to uh, to to affect um, or be able to, we'll call it, control that situation between us and the dog physically. So arm strength and that use also, when you tense up here, you're actually creating a center of gravity here that is not centered over your body, over your legs, over your center of gravity. So you've created another fixed point when you tense up to pull back, which takes you off balance. The dog also feels tension from you, and when dogs feel tension from you, they're going to do a counter move to that. So they're going to pull harder or pull away or disagree with the tension or be concerned about, why are you tense? So it creates all these issues in that dog's mind about, why are you tense? And what do clients do when they're out walking their dogs and they see another dog or a situation they're afraid their dog is going to, react or get into? They start pulling back on the dog, creating tension in themselves, and the dog is looking for, why are you tense? And so they create the situation with their dog being reactive and fearful and having to amp it up because the human is afraid. That's the way the dog interprets the tension. So they're actually amping things up in their own dog, and they don't realize that. So that's one of the issues with that neck versus arm situation. Of course, there's center of gravity, and you put any weight here. What is a harness for? It's for a dog to pull. Put a harness on a husky, watch what it does. It pulls. And that's their natural body position to do so. They feel that opposition, and it's an oppositional response. You do the same thing with a collar here, especially when it drops down here. It's the reason prongs and all those should be up here, sized correctly, should be up right below the mandible and behind the cranium area. And that's the best position for it if you're going to use a prong, or frankly, even a martingale or any of those types, or a slip lead, because it gets it off that oppositional response of feeling that pressure that they want to go against. So even tool use is dependent upon our morphology, frankly. So uh, then we've got horizontal spine rotation versus vertical spine rotation. Now, the horizontal spine rotation is in relationship to not just the undulations back and forth as a dog moves front to back, but up and down as well, and then rotationally. And that gives them a lot of strength and a lot of power and a lot of fluidity. Humans don't walk correctly once they become adults, frankly, and they never learned how. And that's one of the things that I teach in martial arts is how to properly stay on balance 100% of the time. You don't you don't step and fall and catch yourself with your heel. You put the leg out, which that weight draws you forward, and your foot's already there, knowing what the ground is doing, whether it goes away, whether it comes up, because you haven't fallen, you haven't assumed there was anything there. That's your point man out front. Here I am giving you answers again. But typically, humans are falling 99% of the time and just catching themselves. So it's very easy to take a human off balance. That's in jujitsu. I've been in combat jujitsu for 54 years of my life. And it's very easy to take people off balance just with a finger, frankly. So a dog can certainly do it when its balance center of gravity is way down and it has intent. Leg length is another aspect. We talked about dogs being generally even and square, but the multiplication of four on the floor, so to speak, is they've got two pulling, pushing, driving vehicles essentially on the ground, mostly at the same time, depending on the gait and speed and all of that stuff. Whereas our leg length, and so their leg lengths are about square to body generally for a normal dog. There can be slight differences in those. The ones that humans have, I'll call it manufactured, such as some of the terriers, the short ones, the dachshunds, and those type. Of course, they were specifically bred for purpose. Um, and then the sight hounds being more leggy, I'll put it that way. So with leg length, a human body, our legs are, first of all, that's the largest muscle groups in our body is our legs. And humans developed to be able to run literally half a day um, trotting along and running much faster animals down for other reasons, and the animals basically uh, expiring because of energy and heat, whereas we didn't. So our advantage was actually running down, being bipedal, but with long strides and less effort, frankly, because of that. But using your legs is where the key to solving the balance thing is. But we're generally about 2/5 to half a body length for our legs, and that's other than an ostrich or something like that, that's almost unheard of in the animal kingdom. Um, you even look at giraffes, as tall as they are, their body length and neck length, they're not even half for each of the legs of the body length that we are. So then we've got paw use versus hand use is another part of the morphology that we have differences, and the way we think and the way we use those aspects. Paws on a dog are used to uh, for motivation, moving, push off, to grab, wrap around, to trap, those sorts of things. Whereas ours are used in all sorts of directions, even behind us, that we can go doing things, grabbing things, hitting things, blocking, et cetera, or very fine manipulation of very fine uh, aspects, which dogs obviously can't do with their paws. They had no need to. So those two things, humans, interestingly enough, don't think too much about paw versus hand. And There are some big gaps there in understanding of use. You know, a lot of trainers, clients, vets, everybody, you know, uh, groomers have problems touching the paw of a dog. Well, that's because that's their freedom, that's their motivation. They didn't give you permission to do that. So the way we think of hands and grasping each other's hands is, you know, if somebody comes up and grabs your hand, you're going to pull it back. Well, same thing for a dog. So, and then joints, we have the simple versus complex. The simple joint, like an elbow, versus a complex, like a rotational and articulating wrist or ankle. You know, knee, me and elbow, and then our shoulder joint, where dogs don't have that. So the hips are ball rotation on both species, and then the shoulders is their scapula is non-jointed to they don't have a ball joint like we do. So those are two different aspects, and it's amazing how many people don't understand or don't realize that dogs don't have a shoulder joint. Uh, they don't think a lot about it because most of the damage that happens in dogs is in the hips because of, you know, some sort of uh, disease or other things where that ball joint is so critical. Um, so anyway, then we go on to, again, still within morphology, the heat dissipation. So dogs breathing, panting, tongue, and a few exposed in skin areas like the ear area, less fur on it, sometimes on the inside that can dissipate heat. Obviously, their tongue, all of that, the nose a bit, their underbelly and paws, base of paws and paw pads, underbelly being inguinal area with less fur to no fur on those areas for most dogs. And that's their heat dissipation, breathing, panting, all of those things. Whereas ours um, is nose, mouth, and sweat glands, and the sweat glands are over most of our body. There, there are a few places where we don't have sweat glands, but generally we're a very efficient uh, heat sink, if you will, one way or the other in evaporative cooling, which is why one of the reasons why we've been able to adapt to so many different environments over thousands of years. And what's the issue about that? A lot of people don't think about dogs uh, becoming overheated uh, or feeling that they're going to be cold because we're cold, depending on the situation. And if you've ever had huskies or malamutes or, you know, Samoyeds or those types of animals, they want to sit out when it's 35 below in the snow because, you know, that's husky summer for them. That's their universe. They actually want to be out there, and you know, if your neighbors saw you with your huskies out in snow all night long, they'd call the cops on you for being an animal abuser when it's the huskies that want to be out there. You know, so there's and obviously overheating, especially in most of our environments and you know, lower 48s and southern Canada area. Um, we get pretty hot sometimes, you know, 100 plus in almost all places within these areas. And certainly here in Texas. So you really have to be careful. And it's not just the heat dissipation from the body for overheating, panting. Obviously, there's different morphology of the dogs, from the brachycephalics to the dolichocephalics, etc. Um, and more surface area, obviously, with a longer muzzle, mouth, etc., and tongue. So that's what's going to keep a dog from dying in the heat too much. Obviously, they are going to search for, number one, they need water as much as we do. They don't usually drink as much water as we do because we're just a porous system with sweat glands, so we actually sweat out more. They don't need as much liquids as we do, but when they do, and they're not used to, if they live indoors in a hotter climate, then if you get out with them for too long, they're panting and it's dry. They're not dissipating heat anymore. They're going to overheat. And I've had to carry 100+ pound dogs that people did not realize were going into heat stroke, pick them up and take them to their car and tell them to get to the emergency vet immediately. Saved their lives because the 5 minutes they would have been gone because they just don't realize that dogs are not humans. So we've got these gaps of understanding. Just because we feel it a certain way doesn't mean that animal does. And while you've got shoes on, and I know there's all sorts of internet cautions and probably from trainers, et cetera, for their clients of making sure that when you're walking your dog at various temperatures in the summer, depending on the surface, obviously grass is going to be less of a problem. Concrete, yeah, it reflects a lot depending on the color of the concrete, but it could reflect a lot of heat. Whereas asphalt, if you have you know any type of dark asphalt, it absorbs the heat enormously, and it could easily be 140, 145 degrees, which will burn their paws very rapidly. So you just have to be aware of those things, and that's a gap again, a problematic between us because when we feel comfortable and safe, that doesn't mean it's right for the dog. Environmental adaptation, so size mediation in warmer and colder climates for dogs, depending on the use, etc., versus general adaptation plus clothing and shoes for us. So we can add clothes to protect ourselves against, sun and heat absorption, or we can add clothing to cover us up in hyper cold climates. We can adapt because that's what we've done as a species. Them, on the other hand, especially double coated dogs and people shaving them, that's the worst idea you could have because the double and triple coats are what protect them directly from that heat absorption. So you're actually not just damaging the dog through heat, but it ruins their guard fur coat as well. So don't do that. And you guys know that. Food types and nutrition. Obviously, canines are carnivores. They're relatively low carnivore need in protein compared to wolves, but they're both in the same category of not hyper, but and not hypo, but a median of a carnivore, so 30 to 70% meat and food types, whereas we're more omnivores. Now we thrive better, frankly, on a little higher level of meats and animal proteins. We actually thrive better. Our immune system, our body processes it that way. Our teeth orientations, all of those things tell you that we're omnivore, but we are pretty good. We're about a 30% carnivore need in nutrition. So done a lot of studies on that. I don't talk about that, I don't think, too much in that nutrition class, but um, that I believe I do go over that a bit. So let's look at morphology, the capabilities then. So speed in reaction. So reaction timing, with dogs, uh, their timing is once again because they have a different sense of time, a pace of time for us. Their responses are fast and they believe their own reactions. we hesitate, we think, and we don't respond the way that we did 20,000 years ago because, once again, we have learned how to control and manipulate an environment and our entire world to where we feel safe. So if something comes along, it's a surprise to us, whereas a dog actually expects things to still be in a predatory threat situation because that's how their brains have developed. They haven't developed into a human, I'll put it that way. So their reaction timing generally, unless you practice very, very much and kind of continuously through your life, your response time is going to be much slower than theirs. So where's that gap? What does that happen? Okay, so they're responding to something that you may or may not even be aware of, and that's a huge gap. Um, that puts you um, in a position with the dog where the dog is in a superior position to you because you're human and you're not responding quickly enough or at all to what the dog responds to and understands as potential in the environment. And so the dog, you lose trust of the dog in those situations, uh, to not trust you to handle it because you aren't that top predator. And the closer you get to understanding the environment and timings, we'll go over that next time, the less you lose face, so to speak. So, humans try to control reactions of dogs instead of themselves becoming better at understanding reactions. So canines use their mouth. We use our hands generally in responding to those things. Timing of them moving a mouth short distance versus us getting out of the way. They're faster in that twitch muscle group, especially since their neck is so large and muscular, and we have to recoil from it. So, I still have a little tiny bruise on my middle finger. I'm not going to give you the middle finger, but there's a tiny bruise in the center of that nail right there where I made the mistake of picking up a stick, a small stick like this, in front of a Malinois in course two, and it went for the stick, and its canines hit right there as I was pulling out. I'm glad I had enough speed to get it out, otherwise it would have gone to the bone. But that's the kind of quick reaction. It was just that dog was uh, trained to do that. I'll put it that way. Okay. And I didn't even think about it. I went, okay, no more sticks around you, buddy. Uh, so, and then strength again, front to back and rotational, especially that muscular strength of that head whipping back and forth. That's their strength in a dog. Versus side to side and rotational for us. Our rotation is vertical, so we move that shoulder forward, and we've got a lot of strength and speed, being able to use each one of our vertebrae to accelerate and multiply that power and that motion in this direction. They do it this direction, so they can tear and rip and all that stuff. And we do it by even opposite hip motion or direct hip motion. So we're moving in a different way. And sometimes we outdo them, and sometimes they outdo us. It's that gap between those two things that you've got to be aware of, and sometimes it causes problems between us. So um, all of these things factor in, guys. Um, Jumps, obviously, a dog at speed. First of all, they're faster than us running by far. and they've got full body extensions on front to back paws. They can extend way out, and if you've ever seen like the way greyhounds or salukis, extend their entire body out, their their running pace is, I've forgotten the exact distance, but it's massive between steps, uh, you know, 3 times what a human can do. And so almost, 2 times the speed um, that they can do. So as far as jumps, they can jump horizontally, not so much up. They can hit, and I'm sure you've seen videos of Malinois jumping off particular walls and jumping backwards and grabbing something pretty high distance, but they need something to jump off of rather than our vertical jumps. A dog, I mean, for instance, Bosch. Some of you guys have seen Bosch do a hop up on a 4-foot thing. He could jump over. He could stand next to a 4-foot fence and just hop over it. And he's a pretty good sized German Shepherd. Toffee could probably jump over 5 feet easily, just standing there and just hopping over it, as a smaller German Shepherd. And but when you put a brace, uh, yeah, Tiffany, when you put a brace in front of them and their speed, that adds to jump height. So it's pretty easy for Bosch to uh, do a fairly short run and jump up on top of a 7-foot tall hay bale. Whereas we can't put our feet up there, but because of our body, if we have a 21 to 30-inch vertical jump where, actual height, we can grab onto stuff and we can also climb. So that's a difference in not just capabilities, but expectations. And a lot of the training for sports has we take advantage in training of dogs knowing that they've got capabilities for jumps like that they can put their entire bodies up because of the strength to weight ratio versus us. Our strength to weight ratio is about power versus extension, typically. So um, use of defense mechanisms, then tactics and strategies. Well, dogs, they move to protect their hindquarters, and they present the business end of the mouth. I talked about that, last time. Humans are wanting to control everything in front of us for our vision, for our hands, to defend and control, to manipulate here. So that's where humans get in a lot of trouble with dogs, is they're going to use their mouth on your hands. They understand that's what we do to manipulate, etc. And so humans get uh, concerned about their hands getting bitten because those are like knives to us. And the thing about it is, if you stay away from the mouth, you're not going to get bitten by a dog. Whereas humans actually have a number of other tools that we could use against predators, but without practice, understanding, and intent, um, modern humans go into a panic. So that's a massive gap there between a dog's physical capability and what they use versus the ability of humans, because we don't generally, as a species, we don't study those unless you're in a certain line of work. To me, if you're working with dogs, you should learn more about that, how to defend yourself or how to take advantage of situations that may assist your dog too, like another dog or groups of dogs coming up to you and your dogs. So that's a gap in itself, okay, a problem. Um, So climbing, dogs are only they can only climb generally. I mean, they can kind of claw up, but they don't have the ability like cats do or squirrels or any of those types of animals to crawl up a tree, whereas humans do because we've got opposable thumbs, and we were originally, our ancestors and some other great apes species still are capable of living life in a tree. But so we still have that adaptation, and our the way we're built is it's pretty easy for us to climb in or on things. It's pretty amazing what these parkour guys have been doing with up buildings, up. It's actually pretty amazing to watch some of those guys that are very skilled. Um, I don't think I would have tried that even if I was 50 years younger, because I know what happens when you fall. I've been there. So climbing is an issue, although it can be problematic. Why? Because dog can jump and hit the top of a 6-foot fence and be gone, or hit a half rail like huskies do on a wooden fence and jump over at the corner, and they're gone. So those are problematics that people need to understand, and that dogs are capable of, on the run and a launch jump. They can clear pretty good heights. Uh, then running, dogs have 4 legs, power and rhythm, and so there's a multiplication of their capability of speed. They have less mass to move quicker, as well as in the legs themselves. So our legs are pretty massive. That's a not quite half our weight is in our legs, and that's not true for dogs. So they're capable of trotting along or running at high speed. So versus our 2 legs. Um, One of the things that is kind of a match, depending on the the environment, though, is the capability of canines to run long distances, and humans too. And that's one of the ways that we matched up originally tens of thousands of years ago, is we could move together across the landscape to find prey to hunt together. If we didn't have that capability to run long distances without dying from heat exhaustion, and the same for them, we never would have matched up using dogs, or creating that situation where that proto dog and us came together to work together to become co-species, essentially. Okay. Use of defense mechanisms, the tactics and strategies of dogs. Again, movement to protect hindquarters, humans mostly wanting to control in front. So let's go to the brain. So dogs, again, we talked about it last time, 8.4 billion neurons, but even a little over 2.5 times morphologically different depending on the breed of the dog. A Chihuahua versus a Mastiff. The size of the cranium itself, you know, outside of the Chihuahua, you're actually seeing that cranium on the outside, whereas while it's bigger inside of a Mastiff by probably 2.5 times, the head size is this size, so you're not looking at the cranium on larger dogs, and that's one of the oddities of that. So humans, 86 billion, so about 10 times as many neurons generally, and we're generally similar rather than having that much difference of more than 2.5 times of brain size capabilities in humans, where we do have in dogs. Doesn't mean they're smaller dogs are stupid, or smaller craniums are stupid. That's still billions and billions of combinations times billions and billions, et cetera, et cetera. But with human brains, there's more possible combinations and specialized areas for meaning, perception, moralities, self, and our environmental awareness of our place in the universe, how long we live versus our whole species versus life versus all this stuff. Dogs don't have that. So we have many more areas of the brain and more capability of contemplating and learning and all of that stuff. So how does that create a problem between dogs and humans? Because humans think everybody just thinks like us, and all your clients think dogs just should be like us. So you talk to your dog and my dog doesn't listen to me. No, it doesn't, because it doesn't have parts of the brain to understand words. And they every human on the earth thinks that dogs understand their language, and that's pretty egocentric. So that's one of the major gaps is understanding their brain is not like ours. Yes, it's very similar. That's why we're able to live together, but that's they are they're different animals. They have survived differently than us. It doesn't mean they're wrong and we're right. They're right in many cases when we're wrong. Then in brain, perception of the environment, the reality of senses, nose and eye versus eyes. So again, we're eye dominant, hand dominant, subdominant, I should say. And nose for a dog, it's all about scent. And brilliant, there's a brilliant video. Um, if I can find it, I will share it with you guys on a laboratory that they do a lot of research mainly for safety, health, forensics, etc. And this lab does that here in the United States. Forgotten exactly where it is. I think it's attached to one of the universities, but it's a brilliant, about 30-minute video uh, documentary on scent, on just air-bound particles, and how it moves, how the dog's nose uh, is an incredible collector of of scent. It's an amazing development, frankly. And so they can pick up more in a particle of scent and understanding than our vision will ever be able to take us. So those senses, we've got huge gaps in understanding and capabilities between the two species. And dogs look at us to check in with how we smell and how they smell the entire environment, and we're totally unaware of those things. We look at things, and especially, we'll see a squirrel up in a tree, and most species, most breeds of dogs won't pay attention to anything above their ground plane because they know they can't climb, so it doesn't matter to them. So we're picking out things they can't, and they're picking out many things we can't and won't even know about. So there's massive gaps there, and a lot of the training, a lot of the behavior work that we do and use is to try to get that much covered of these massive gaps between our understanding of the environment of reality, because reality isn't just what we see or hear. So uh, then the lower brain, limbic and autonomic systems were very, very similar. The structure of those, the meaning, the intent behind those areas is different because of our morphology, what we are as a human versus a canine. So the responses, all of those things, that's genetically controlled to to be what it is. Our heart rate's a certain way, our temperature's a certain way, theirs is different. How we respond to stimuli, the emotions that we have, and the neurotransmitters that produce those combinations. That's different in learned emotions than dogs have, because they didn't need those emotions. So we've got a different level of emotions that we think are our reality. We rely on our emotions to tell us what's right and wrong, when in fact emotions are just a personal interior thing. That's not reality. It's just how we feel. And so where we have a huge gap there then is the base level of emotions that are for survival and understanding of being together as social animals versus all of the I'll say societal emotions that humans have developed. That's a massive misunderstanding, and clients um, and a lot of trainers still um, equate a lot of behaviors of dogs to all of those learned advanced emotions that humans have, and that's not that. They don't have those things. So it already sets up a misunderstanding and a huge gap of how you solve those problems between human and dog, because you're punishing or disagreeing with something that the dog doesn't even think, can't. So massive gaps. Uh, the upper brain, the developmental cognitive power of dogs and humans. We have a prefrontal cortex. They do not. We have parts of the brains that they don't, and those are specialized. We have areas that that are more developed for morality, but they're variable too. Whereas a dog's morality is a pretty localized segment, and once again, it's uh, shorter lifetimes, and their morality is based upon a a trust and a need, and aberrant behaviors are rejected very quickly, whereas humans try to include all humans and accept all humans at various times for various reasons. So there's a massive gap difference in understanding of those parts of the brain. Um, so that's the upper brain, and of course the upper brain is different than the lower brain as far as thought processing, value, the understanding of things, the experimentation, the cognitive values. And dogs are variable in their cognition capabilities depending on the breed and the size of the brain as well. Whereas humans, almost all humans are cognitively able once introduced or educated or self-educated. Almost all humans are capable of doing a massive amount of very similar cognition. Unfortunately, most don't ever use that. No, I'm kidding. Um, then concepts of social survival. Dogs are about small groups. They don't run in herds of thousands, whereas humans have global ideas of social order and et cetera, et cetera. Right now, globally, we're all concerned about a particular you know war that's going on that might escalate, and most everybody is trying to assuage that and end that conflict. Well, there's always generally on Earth there are about 63 conflicts on average. You don't hear about most of them, but about average per year, there's about 63 conflicts on Earth somewhere, a civil war, something like that going on throughout the world, and different places at different times, but you don't hear about those things. So, we have this general idea of a concept of human moralities and how we should behave to all survive together. And that's difficult when you're talking about 8 billion individuals, whereas dogs don't have to deal with that. They only deal with what's in their very small pack group. And then whenever they encounter another, then it's subject to their understanding of things. So, what is the gap there, and what's the problem? all humans think all dogs should be like this, and just understand that, everybody we encounter in our 8 million person city and 3 million dogs, we should just my dog should just accept all of that, and that's an impossibility. It's not within a dog's capability to do that, and it makes no sense to them psychologically, genetically, or otherwise. And then concepts of time, that's another gap area. Dogs, they are looking at lifetime effects. They don't think about their lifetime, but their genetics and the way their brain and their body is set up is for their lifetime only, and they only affect things within their lifetime. Humans think about galactic concepts of time, or universe time concepts. And so we go beyond our own lives. We see our lives as tiny little specks within a continuum of time, even understanding time itself, which nobody's been able to really define time in a scientific way. So, um, so there's a gap in that, in the way we think beyond ourselves, and expect the same, I will say, graciousness for the next generations, um, and expectations that humans have of previous and future generations and aspects, versus what a dog does within its own lifetime. It doesn't make any sense to it. Um, Concepts of language and communication, well, we work on that a lot in a lot of the classes, because it really is about language and communication. Um, and You're talking about direct contact communications, which is what dogs do, other than scent and sight. That I'll include sight in direct contact, but scent can be direct. It is direct contact of particles, but that could be vastly remote. I mean, they can smell when wind whips across the Sahara and lifts particles of sand across the ocean, and they land even in California, all the way across the continent. Their dogs over in California can smell that sand from the Sahara. We can't. We see it in the air if it's dusty. That's about it, because that's our needed senses. So direct contact versus remote capabilities. And remote capabilities for dogs are sound, again, smell, that's the most remote thing, and, well, leaving their smell, leaving their scent places. So urination, defecation, rubbing, etc. All of those things, licking. Whereas our remote capabilities go throughout the galaxy, essentially. So, yeah, how we communicate, what we communicate with, and what we consider language. One of the probably most shocking things that I teach, apparently, is for people to understand that that dogs don't understand a word that you say, and that there's a, a better way, a more communicative way to I'll say talk in a human word to your dog without making a sound. Because movement, motion, body position, intent, speed, distance, all of those things, that's how they communicate mainly. And sound is a reinforcement in ways, or a call to arms, so to speak. So, as a warning order. So let's talk about drives. So survival drive, the environmental responses, predatory mindset that we talked about on dogs, versus cautiousness, and humans being, again, going back to environmental controlling. Uh, we are used to being safe, and so our cautiousness is because we're not practiced at a predatory, um, um, suspect of everything. In other words, everything could be a predatory threat to us or a threat in some sort. But when we are surprised, the unknown surprise, then we respond with cautiousness, stun. In other words, we hesitate, whereas a dog probably won't in most cases. So, and then we both we have we have recognized threat avoidances, both of us, both species, but um, what they see to avoid and what we see to avoid are two vastly different things. We look ahead and we see, someone pouring concrete on the street, and so we walk around that thing, whereas dogs may go right up to it, walk through it. They don't even know. So it's just the difference of how we see what threats are or avoidance necessaries as survival drives. You know, again, going to fear, uncertainty, doubt, they respond a bit different than we do, unless they're in a severe behavior mode. And then practiced responses. Both humans and dogs can become very skilled at practiced responses for survival. And if you're working with dogs, you should, because that gives you, I will say, street cred with them to for them to trust you as a leader role, as a trusted partner. So then we get into social responses and acceptance. Okay. Acceptance for a dog and acceptance for a human can be similar things, but it's very much different when we have expectations put on our dogs that are unrealistic. Morality. So for dogs, it's trust through patterning versus humans want interaction and agreement. So we're looking for the interaction of others automatically more as a herd than as a pack that's not necessarily trusting initially. Their initial meetings are, uh, how do you smell what you're thinking? How do you feel? All of those things through smell. Whereas we're studying, looking at interaction. We want to be safe, and our response to safe is societal and wanting to befriend everybody, whereas dogs have no interest in befriending everybody. And that's a huge gap because, well, my dog just wants to play. And no, my dog doesn't. And that has nothing to do with the dog being a good or bad dog. That has to do with genetics. So again, pack mentality, the pro-social aspect of solid pack mentality versus human herd mentality, where you don't want to stand out. Um, you may be specialized and good at certain things, and those people tend to get recognized. But with a pack mentality, it's each individual has a purpose within that pack. That's what pro-social behavior is. And if you don't have a purpose within the pack, then you're not needed. So you're a burden to the pack. Whereas herd mentality, the more of us there are, the safer we feel because we won't be picked out. And then social isolation, sorry, even momentarily for a dog is possibly a harsh punishment or ostracization, whereas human is similar, but starts with embarrassment, shame, ostracization, all of those sorts of things. And so humans don't want that. Dogs don't want it either, but it's over when it's over for them. They may have lost place in the pack, so to speak, and humans do too, but we see it differently as more of a status thing, whereas dogs generally don't. Territorial boundaries, then. So dogs are based upon survival understanding, and again, borders, etc. Time, distance, pack size, strength, resources. Human is more of a community, cultural pressures, acceptances, and agreements. So that our understanding of territory and how we define territory is different than dogs see. Again, our modern dogs, our modern European breeds that we created from the basil and ancient breeds, they are more likely to understand and accept our size of what we define as our territory. Our territory is based upon an understanding, a morality, a piece of paper that, okay, this is mine, that's yours. I'm not going to come over and steal your land, and you're not going to steal mine. Um, but dogs don't know that. They don't think that way. And the dog next door is a territorial threat. So that's why the fence fighting, that's why all the other things, that's why, you know, dogs bark out the front window when there's something that goes by that they disagree with on their territory. So that's a huge area of problematics for dogs versus humans in the way we think of things. Um, then the senses, we have direct senses. We've gone through this: eyes, ears, nose, feel, and touch. And so I won't belabor that since we're running out of time anyway. I've talked about that quite a bit in the past. So learning ability bias, then brain and body experiences in relationship to our environments. Our environments, what humans do versus what dogs do and see and experience, they're different. And even though we go into, for instance, a Home Depot and we expect all Home Depots to be exactly the same, to a dog, it's an entirely different environment. Sound, smells, etc., etc. I give that example because a lot of people take their dogs to Home Depot or places like that. And so we think that we assume already that the dog is going to be fine when it could be an entirely different experience for that dog. Um, so how they equate uh, a similar place or what we think is exactly the same is not. Uh, so brain complexities, understanding of survival, each issue is the question there. And then how I say stitch complexities together to make sense and achieve acceptable results. Two different things. Our morphology is entirely different. Our brain, our purpose in societies, all of those things are entirely different. It's a massive gap. So, we'll talk about, again, next time we'll begin talking about how do you help close those gaps. And that's a massive part of this. So, and then drive to learn better understandings and results for survival versus, and to pass on the information versus to the family and pack through teaching and observances. So the social and practical survival. So we do similar things, but the survival to us is: what school did you go to? What clothes do you wear? How much do you make? What do you do for your family? All of those sorts of things. And in a way, it's similar for dogs, but we get so wrapped up in our human world that creates a huge gap. And what's the gap? Well, I'll give you one example. I buy my food for my dogs and they don't appreciate it. I'm in charge because I give them food and I bought all this stuff. Dogs have no idea about what bought means. There's no word in that make sense to them for bought. Um, so it's the attitude and intent of the human doing things all their lives that make no sense to a dog and have no purpose for a dog. So that's a massive gap. Developmental timing, ages, developmental periods in dogs versus human lifetimes and periods. So newborn is obviously equates to a human newborn. Puppy neonatal, so first 3 weeks, you've got a human infant, still a newborn. Puppy self-ambulatory experimental phase or experiential phase, up to 10 and a half weeks, 10 to 12 weeks. That's equivalent to a human toddler exploring around, bumping its head and stuff, although puppies, even at 10 to 12 weeks, are much more aware and self-ambulatory than is a human toddler. So that's kind of pushing it actually for what the equivalency is. Get into puppy independent developmental period of 3 to 6 months. Now you're talking about an adolescent human. So we're already getting into years of time for a human. You see the developmental difference. And why are these things a gap? Because when humans look at this cute fuzzy fluff ball of a puppy at 4 months old, it's like an adolescent child, not this toy, not this baby. It's no longer a baby. And so that's a huge gap of understanding and causes problems, as you guys know, working with clients, right? Late formative period, so puppy to young adult, 6 to 24 months, massive changes in capabilities, full adult size, all of those things. That's kind of the human teenager, if you will, more 1 to 2 year time period of human teenagers. And then adulthood and full maturity, 2 to 7 years. Well, talking about human young adults to full maturity, meaning prefrontal cortex at 24 years of age, to adulthood, to middle age. So we've got 4 periods that cover decades of our time for that 2 to 7 year period for dogs. And then seniors for dogs, human seniors, and then aged, the human aged, very elderly, um, which for humans, because of what we're doing, keeps shifting off in time. So we're talking about a dog that as a aged, you're talking about a 13-year-old dog versus a 80 or 90-year-old person. So our developmental time and what we do and how we do it and how we think, the age perspectives then come into influences and how we see dogs. And we go from basically seeing a puppy to an adult to a senior and not much beyond that. So human thought is only seeing their dog in very, uh, in relative stages that we want to recognize as, this puppy baby, and then this adult dog that we still consider child, which causes problems, to then seniors that we're emotional about wanting to take care of. So it's constant. We want to take care of them like a child all its entire life. That causes problems, and I know you guys understand that. You work with that. Again, this is the gaps. This is what we're going over, and it's why we went over the dog versus human biases and all of those things. Okay. So, and then perspectives based upon species. Um, our perspectives, how we think of things, how we see things, how we understand things, very different, as you guys know. Perception as the brain and body learns to survive and manipulate their world, us versus them, much quicker in what they need to do to survive versus us. Takes us years and years and years to develop what a dog does within a year. And then controlling the outcome, again, is easier than understanding. It's a different result at the end. So we always, as humans, we want to control outcome. We want to control everything else but us. And dogs are more, I will say, uh, rapidly realistic about the outside influences versus humans. We have long time of learning our lessons. So, what a dog learns at 2 years of age, we seem to start finding out about 30 years of age. Emotions, then, the base versus the learned developmental. We talked about those. I talk about those in many classes. I'm not going to beat a dead horse there. Self-understanding, development of what is necessary, which is a dog, versus development of what's possible beyond what was done before. That's a human. And so that self-understanding of trying to accomplish something beyond what was done before or differently or our take on it versus just survival, what's necessary. So we're always trying to accomplish beyond what the last guy did or the next guy over or your neighbor or things like that. Dogs don't care. They just don't care. So um, all of our learned emotions of jealousy or pride or all those things, that the way we do those things uh, creates a very difficult situation between us and the dogs. recognizing dogs and humans are superior, more capable in areas that matter to each species. Just because you can do things a certain way and think a certain way doesn't mean that that's what the dog is doing or thinking. And the reason we matched together was we were specialists at those parts of survival. So dogs have their answers and human has their answers. And it's only the answer for them that you have to respect and understand. That dog has answers that you don't have, that they need, and leave that part to them and don't crush it. Development of a better understanding of other dogs, humans, and other animals in their environment is what dogs do. We need to develop a better understanding of the intelligence and capabilities of other animals because we see ourselves as the superior being in the entire universe, which puts us as uh, non-connected observers. That's about it. Manipulation of the environment. Then the third area, canids versus bear versus cat line, we talked about, versus Homo sapien development. Massive differences in how we manipulate the environment. Uh, in Again, we talked briefly about adaptation to other environments from from our capability, our bodies, our morphologies, but we also are capable of taking technologies into areas that dogs can't. Our cranial capacities, our problem solving. So dogs are problem solving limited to what's possible within a natural lifespan, and humans are problem solving for generations to come. Creation of skills and strategies to adapt to the environment and survival is what dogs do. We're creation of technologies, tools, ideas, of medicines, on beyond, quantum physics. What's the universe? Things that dogs will never do, don't need to, don't care to, and don't have the time or the brain to do so. Uh, Not necessary for their survival. So our thoughts are our thoughts, their thoughts are their thoughts. And the more we can match up understanding them, the better off we are. So food sources, to them, it's they came out of a natural situation. For us, it's tools and controls for food sources. We plant stuff and we raise stuff. Dogs can't plant or raise things. So different idea about that. So when you empty that can of food or that, or you cook that steak or you pour that kibble in their bowl, they know it's coming from you. They don't know you bought it. They have no idea where it came from. Safer environments, establishment of territory for a dog versus technology and extra social agreements that humans have. We don't have that dogs don't have extra social agreements with other packs of dogs or predators. Uh, that provides, again, major differences and gaps in how we think and expectations of dogs from our standpoint and misunderstandings from the dog standpoint. That's what all these things are, guys, is the gaps. It's the biases between what dogs are and how they think versus us. Cooperative cognitions to control and change the immediate environment for a dog, and there is no overall species driven plan versus technologies and tools to change natural outcomes to suit humans. That's what we're trying to do. Environment and human driven change of brain patterns, drive emphasis for dogs to adapt to new purposes and expectations versus human change of brain, thoughts, and adaptations from information and passing on generational increasing knowledge. So we are cumulative of all the generations behind us as long as we've been able to pass on that information, and we don't have to rediscover it. Every generation of dog has to rediscover. Um, Dogs are a small group collectivity in small numbers. And species driven, so specializations. Humans are pro-social cultural creation based upon environmental adaptations, large group collectivity, and mass creating specializations within pro-social concepts for everybody. Dogs don't do that. So we have this concept once again. Why is this a problem? Because we walk our dog into some outdoor restaurant and expect our dog to behave like us when it has no concept of that. It doesn't make sense to it to walk into a place with a bunch of humans and other predators there. Makes no sense to them. You have you have to you have to do the work. Well, we'll talk about that next time. Okay. Natural entropy still rules. Brains and physical life requires energy to power. So life is always looking for a more survivable way through problem solving and adaptation. Okay. And I'm going to stop there because that we've pretty much said everything on what the gaps, the different morphologies, the different understandings, different brain capabilities and technology capabilities of humans and dogs and what our biases are to each other. And that creates gaps and misunderstandings. And that's what, as trainers, behaviorists, etc., we're trying to bridge that gap for our clients. So the more we understand all of those things, the easier it is for us to be effective. That's why we're talking about this in this sequence and series. I hope that makes sense. I see a bunch of people jumped off. They probably thought it was the same thing as the last two times. It's not, because this is the setup for the next one or even two or even three times talking about problem solving. So how do we do these things? How do we create situations that or understandings that make sense to the dog and the human, that we have uh, less gaps, fewer gaps, and smaller gaps between us, because we'll always have gaps. So anyway, I hope that was not too much technical information, boring, or anything else for you guys. Uh, I hope that was helpful, and we'll jump into it next time a little deeper. So, okay, guys. All right. We will see you hopefully next time. Thank you all for sticking it out with me, and look forward to working with you guys again.